welcome to the LA Times Talks at the Sundance Film Festival. I am Jen Yamato, film reporter at the LA Times, and I am delighted to welcome in conversation the makers and star of the Sundance 2022 film Alice. We have joining us director and screenwriter Krystin Ver Linden, star and executive producer Keke Palmer, and producer Peter Lawson. Welcome, everybody.
Hey.
Thank you.
Hi.
So we want to start off by giving people a little bit of a taste of what Alice is about, what this movie is, because obviously this is the first time any audiences will be seeing the film when it world premieres here at the virtual festival. I'll just throw it out there, this description, but please jump in, tell me how you would like it described and put out into the world. I would say Alice is a dramatic thriller with a lot of other genre touches and homages, which are really fun surprises to discover, about a woman named Alice who is born into bondage, escapes the plantation in Georgia that she's known her whole life, only to find out that it is actually the year 1973. That in itself is such a journey of a sentence to say, but it is really just the start of her story. And Keke, you play Alice. Krystin, you wrote this movie and directed it. This is your directorial debut. Peter, you produced this during a COVID pandemic, and I'm sure many other usual crises that afflict
An interesting election.
An election, yes. So there's a lot here to talk about, but I wanted to start with that premise. Krystin, take us through the germination of the ideas, the real life accounts even, which I think a lot of people will be maybe learning about for the first time, that inspired the story.
Yeah, I mean, it started with my mom sending me a bunch of articles and telling me these are amazing stories, you should write about them. And she didn't tell me anything other than that. So I took it with a grain of salt, like, oh God, oh Lord, what is my mom sending me? Because she sends me some crazy stuff. And I opened them, and they were the most amazing stories that made me feel proud of my heritage and made me feel every emotion you can imagine, from anger to feeling the excitement for the interesting thought that crossed my head that I wasn't expecting when I read all of these accounts. And they all happened in the 60s, from men to women, all adults, was there was a moment in me where I got excited because I was like, oh my God, they get to see the world for the first time, really. And that was a spark, along with everything else that went with it, for me to then begin writing it. And every story was amazing.
And just to dive a little bit deeper, these stories, there's several accounts that have been published over the years. Like you said, a lot of them were actually accounts at least taken down or shared by people who lived in the 60s, right? And this film is set in the 70s. But tell us a little bit more about these accounts that you read, that your mom sent to you. Thank you, Mom, right? But tell us a little bit more about those accounts and what was in them.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest influence was this specific woman. It was a People magazine story, and it starts with her coming back to this place. And the journalist was really smart about the way they wrote it, because they bring us into the story without us knowing anything, without any preface to what we're getting ourselves into. And as she gets closer to this place, and then she begins to talking about, they said, how do you feel? And she says, well, going back onto the plantation. So as a reader, you're going like, wait, what? Like, what are you talking about? And as you get deeper into the story, she begins to tell what happened to her and how she was born here and how she was raised there, and the legacy of her family not knowing what was going on the outside, and the family that had them there. And unfortunately, her life was 10 times more brutal than anything I could ever put on film or would want to. But her journey out and what she did with her life when she got out was truly inspiring. And it made me love her so much. Like she will forever be in my soul and in my heart. Because it doesn't matter what I'm going through, I'll say, man, you know, I think of her, basically.
And Keke, what was your reaction to hearing about this project, for starters, this character? Were you familiar with the history that had inspired Kristen to write the story?
I was was completely unaware of the history that she was referring to that inspired the film. So that was like a surprise, but it was also interesting and informative. Obviously, unfortunate, but I was very engaged immediately to understand that it was based off of something real. I was also nervous, when the project came to me, because it can be very tricky talking about history and not allowing it to be told from the eyes of the oppressor, or in a framework of being, oh, I feel so bad and this is a movie to feel, this is so victimizing. Like that is a version of the story that I've heard enough times, and it doesn't make me feel good. It doesn't give me the feeling that I get when I revisit those kinds of conversations with my family. It's also not representative of the kind of people that I'm around as a Black person. Like that's not how my father is, my mother is. There's so much strength that they have, even with everything that they've had to endure or that they've seen their parents endure. So it's just not representative of the lineage I feel that I carry. And when I really read the script, I realized that, okay, this is not that. This is exactly the kind of story that I would want to tell when it comes to revisiting history, because it's told to me from the voice of those that survived. When you think about that time period, only the strong could survive that. And I think Alice is very representative of what all Black Americans' ancestors look like, because without them being like Alice, we would not be here. And so that's what really made me attracted to the role and want to do the part. I'm very glad that Kristen chose me.
What were the first conversations between you two like about this? Like, what did you talk? What parts? What aspects of the story did you really talk to and talk about and get into?
Well, I was
The
already
first
a fan of Keke. Oh, sorry.
No,
I was
you
just
go
gonna say
first.
I was already a fan of Keke's. She's brilliant. So when I met her, it felt surreal because I felt like I was meeting Alice. And we connected on a soul level that I think two people needed to connect on in order to do something like this. And it was kind of like we let our guards down and could be real about just our lives. And that meant so much to me.
Yeah, Kristen is very brilliant, but also very down to earth and humble. So she just really has no pretense. So immediately when we met, obviously I read the script and I'm seeing the work, but I did not expect her to be so rad. And so the moment that we started hanging out, we talked, it was just like she said, very open about our personal lives. And, it made me feel comfortable to trust her. This is not a path you want to go down with someone that you don't feel that at ease with, because it just gets a bit too rocky otherwise.
That applies to probably, I'm sure, every movie, but especially movies that need to be handled with sensitivity and understanding. Peter, you're in your career before this, leading up to this movie, you have yourself shepherded many great films across the finish line, movies that really had impacts, such as Spotlight, for example. How did you come to this project, and what was it that you saw in the story of Alice and the way that Kristen wanted to tell it?
When I'd gotten the script and Chris and I first started kind of talking, in the same way that Keke didn't really know about the true kind of history and inspiration behind this, I started kind of digging deep after Kristen sent me some research, and it just kind of blew my mind that this was happening so late into, the century, into the 60s. And this kind of idea, when I read the script and you see the line where it's like it's 1973, I was like, holy shit, like this is something that could be really interesting. And seeing that powerful transformation of her character through that journey with Common's character Frank, I was like, this is something I haven't seen before. And look, I'm always drawn to true stories, movies that are inspired by true events. anytime there is someone trying to fight the oppressor or something bigger than them, and coming through that journey, and that kind of triumphant moment just kind of hooked me. And initially when Chris and I were talking, she was not attached to direct. She had the desire to do it, and the more and more we kind of talked about the script, and working with other first time directors before, I was like, this is the only person that can tell this story. I mean, she had the movie in her head, shot listed, costumes, production design, everything, and I'd be crazy not to give her that opportunity, which she very much deserved.
Well, that leads to another question that I think a lot of people have when they see this movie, and they're going to be like, who is Krystin Ver Linden? It's your directorial debut, but you have written many scripts and that have sold to studios. You made The Blacklist. You have worked in genre and in very interesting meldings of different genre as well. So what made this the movie that you had to get behind the camera and direct?
Because the stories didn't lead me, and as a screenwriter, I look at screenwriting as obviously cathartic, but when you're done with the drafts, you're like a surrogate mother. You take care of the baby, but someone else's baby. And with Alice, it was one of those things where I wasn't willing to give that baby up at all. That was the big difference, was the feeling of like, no, this is the one that I need to do. And that's just something that you feel in your heart and in your stomach, Yeah.
I'm especially with the degree to which this movie really pays homage to the blaxploitation era of cinema and so many iconic moments in Black pop culture as well. I would love to hear some of the artistic influences that you feel, Krystin, went into the formation of your artistic voice, just generally.
Yeah.
Because like a lot of people are gonna want to know this stuff. Who is Krystin?
Yeah. So I should back up. What got me into screenwriting was because I always wanted to be a director. So growing up, my heroes were Akira Kurosawa and Andrei Tarkovsky and Sam Peckinpah, Sergio Leone. And those were the men that I wanted women too. So like, when Sofia Coppola came around when I was a teenager, I was like, oh my God, she's so cool. But, all of my heroes had one thing in common. They got into filmmaking through screenwriting. So just in a neurotic way, in 6th grade, I was like, oh my God, I have to learn how to be a screenwriter. So that kind of changed the direction of, I have to be a director, to let me master screenwriting, and that will get me into directing. And so when it comes to even writing and also directing, the thing that you think of first is tone and feeling, and that that the tangible nature that comes with telling a story. If told right, it should feel tangible. But so with Alice, it was the same approach with any script, was looking at movies that I love from both eras, and specifically for The Plantation. I didn't even think of it as a plantation because I didn't want that I didn't want that energy that comes with that word. Mm-hmm. And so that's why, you look at a lot of movies that take place on a plantation or whatever, they're always beautiful, and everything's, the house is really white and the grass is really green, and, and I wanted to, the first thing was desaturate the first 30 minutes so that we take away the life, because I don't want there to be life in the first 30 minutes. So when she runs out, you really feel it. When we put on a different filter and you see all of the colors come to life. But it was just, pulling movies that I love from the style of Paul Thomas Anderson with There Will Be Blood, to then getting into the 70s to all the Pam Grier movies and all of the blaxploitation movies that I respect and can appreciate. Even Truck Turner with Isaac Hayes and all of those films. So it was just, as a cinephile, going, what are the movies that I love energetically before I even start writing? And that's the long way of saying that, giving you that answer.
No, that's really cool, because I think when you watch Alice, you see you see that your movie is nodding towards the cinematic legacy as well.
Mm-hmm.
Keke,
well, I always think.
Let's talk.
Oh,
sorry.
No, I was just going to
go
say,
on.
The one thing that I think any filmmaker should think about is the camera should be a character. So it's like, in my head, I'm like, if Sam Peckinpah were alive and were to watch this, could I look him in the eye after he saw it? And it's like, yeah, of course. So anyway.
Keke, I'd love to dive into how you pulled off this incredible performance that is at the center of every moment of Alice. This woman goes on such an incredible journey of becoming. It's a journey that she seizes for herself. She motivates herself. And it's really forceful performance from you. And it's really amazing to see you lead a movie, for starters, but also, do what you do in this film. So take us into getting into the mindset of Alice and how you wanted to approach the journey that she goes through.
Man, I wanted to approach the journey very delicately because of a lot of the things that, a lot of things that happen, and it can really take us out of reality. And to your point, it also is in a lot of ways an homage to the Black exploitation era of films. And I didn't want to obviously do that same performance. I wanted to live in that space, but give a very grounded performance, and at the same time display the reality of a person that has lived essentially in captivity, and has lived in a space of abuse and kind of not being themselves, but still honor what I think is so true for most people in that time, was that 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 resilience, and that hope to survive, no matter what Alice endured, whether it was on the plantation or when she was with Frank. Her will to live was her will to live. And she never allowed anybody or any scenario to stop her from feeling like she deserved to own and have her own autonomy, at least over her feelings, even if not over her body in some certain instances. And so it's just very important for me to find places to play those different nuances, because I don't think it's fair to just say she's just strong, but it's also not fair to believe that her silence, or in these moments of being timid, or that means that she's weak. I think in many of those moments she's being street smart, I guess you would call it, and she's trying to figure out how to navigate and what moves to make and when, and observe and learn, and really wanted to show the strong suits of someone that lived probably like a slave. I really wanted to tap into what that could look like, because I think so often when you think of the identity of a slave is beat down, walking slow, can barely speak. And I just don't think that's reality. That's just not true. Yes, that is someone maybe, but I believe we've seen that already. And so I really wanted to try to find a way to explore the other aspects that really exemplify, I think, the power, the resilience, and the strength of Black American culture, because that is also so much of who we are. Even the levity of that is sprinkled in throughout such heavy themes throughout the film is right on point to what I identify as.
Like you said, we have seen movies that cross this terrain before and take very different approaches. So for you, making the decision to come aboard and to take this role and to take this movie on your shoulders as well, was that a difficult decision for you to make, or was it a strategic one?
It was a difficult decision to make. It was this because I think, like especially most millennials, we all have such a complex feeling when it comes to approaching history. And I don't think it's the history itself, it's the way that the narratives are being told. I think more than anything, if I'm looking at it from an audience member, and just being very critical of the subject matter, I think we often are told, it's told from the point of view of feeling guilty or feeling sad for or victimizing. And that's the aspect that is not comforting. It's not the fact that, oh, I don't want to hear and go to the past, because my parents were very open with me growing up about my history as a Black American. I never felt bad once. I felt very proud. I felt encouraged. I felt, wow, we're incredible. I felt like I had a rich history. I didn't feel down about it. And so, I remember when they first, obviously Roots is an iconic film, but I remember when they first played me Roots, they had to hold me back. Like, it's like, I don't want to keep feeling like that. That's what that was. I want to try to give another different version of a narrative that revisits this space, that can be empowering, informative, and also truthful in a different kind of way. And so yeah, it was very important to Common and I both to make sure that we were very delicate with that, because I don't want us to just say screw history and let's not think about the past and let's not talk about that and let's not find ways to tell those stories. I just want us to be really unique with them. And I think Krystin did a beautiful job with being really unique and also factual with this. It's a different lens on the same storyline. And you can only imagine that that's true. It's the same thing that we're asking for today when it comes to Black stories. Let's mix it up. We can go here, but let's not give the same thing. Let's try to go a different approach. And I think it just gives us more stories. It's inspiring to me when I read it, that it gave me more of an eyes view of what stories I could tell in that space. How can we make it different and still revisit?
And Peter, you earlier mentioned, sort of touched on the making of this movie during not just COVID, but during the presidential election. And I want to rewind, take all of you back to the time of making this movie. And actually, you're getting it off the ground. Cameras are about to roll. What was the next part of the adventure like? What was the making of this movie like? And what were the challenges that perhaps you did not expect that presented themselves along
I don't
the
think
way?
you have enough time today to go through the challenges we faced on this movie. No, look, any independent film on a good day, worldwide pandemic notwithstanding, is a huge challenge. So, the preparation on this movie with COVID and everything, COVID being fairly new, and the just keeping everyone safe, all the protocols that we had to follow, and with Krystin being this being her first feature as a director, that was just an added just not distraction, but an added pressure, having to deal with every day, not being able to talk to your actors without a mask on, not seeing that emotion, and it was a struggle, but she came to set very prepared. We made sure that she was surrounded with some amazing professionals, DPs and production designers, costume, so that she had that experience behind her to get that vision across. And she was diligent with Alex, our DP, of shot listing everything and being prepared every day. And the way she would work with the actors was fantastic. But with the COVID was one thing, and then we had this election shooting in the Deep South with a predominantly African American cast and crew, shooting on plantations where there are rallies going on next door to us on a daily basis, added just another element of this intensity. And I think you see it in the movie. I think you see it in the performances, and unfortunately, a lot of what we were seeing firsthand was mirroring a lot of the themes of the picture. And Keke and Common had just come off of supporting the Biden Harris ticket before the election, so they were deep into that. So there was this kind of amazing energy that was happening amongst the kind of core group of us, that we all felt that this was something important, and something kind of liberating too. Once her character leaves the plantation, there was a weight that everyone felt gone. Let's go. Let's get to the 70s and have a little bit of fun and feel, show this amazing kind of transformation of this character.
And Krystin and Keke, what was that experience like for you?
The hardest part wasn't directing. The hardest part was getting out, going getting up with the worry of, is today the day we're going to shut down because someone is going to test positive?
Yeah.
That was there was never, there wasn't the gift that is granted to filmmakers or actors on a normal set where you're like, yeah, we're, like we can relax as far as production goes of how, the schedule and the days, because COVID was the 800-pound gorilla that you had to face every morning. And that was the hardest thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, every time the test results would come over email was like a heart-stopping moment.
Yeah.
They would be, Keke and Krystin would go, "Are we good? Are we good? Yeah, we're good today."
That was the thing for me. That was the big thing for me, is the spookiness of, oh, am I going to be the one that gets us shut down? Or, what, that worry was a lot, you know what I mean? And then also for me, it's like, I'm in the movie, I'm in the character, I'm in the zone. The idea of jumping out of the part, like jumping out of the role in the mind frame of Alice for a week or 2 weeks, or having to hold it in the subconscious of my mind, waiting for us to be able to go back on set and film again. That would have been horrifying. It would have been horrifying. I wanted to really just get through it without any stops, because the emotion was so heavy. So it was just like, anything to not have to be, put this on pause, or, that would have been just crazy.
Well, as Peter mentioned, you're coming off of, being involved in election campaigns. What was that aspect like for you? Did it add an unexpected level of resonance to you?
Yeah, I don't think it was unexpected, but it definitely did add another level of what's the word you used?
Resonance?
Yes, it added more resonance for sure. I was actually going through a hard time with all that stuff that was going on. And not to say that I felt, unfortunately, I felt that way before, when we've seen the deaths and we've seen what's happening with the election and different things that just kind of make you feel like, are we in the 2000s? Are we in 20? What year are we in? That's been heavy for me before, but I'm a strong believer that art and the universe, it all aligns in my life. It always has aligned as it should. So I did not think it was accidental the way that filming happened around the time that I was feeling what I was feeling, because we were actually supposed to film at a different time, and then it got pushed, and then it all aligned kind of in that particular space, which I think was completely divine. And so, yeah, it was resonating with me very deeply, and I needed a place to let that emotion out, because I felt very, very helpless. And I still believe that for me, yes, I'm out there, but at the end of the day, I'm not a typical, or what you would consider an activist. That's not what my life is necessarily dedicated to. But when it comes to my art and what I try to portray, that is my version of it. That is me giving what I can to what I believe in, and trying to share a message to hopefully empower others. And so I feel like that Alice was able to be that for me, because it's easy to get defeated and to feel like, what can I do? Because guess what? You really can't do everything. You know what I mean? Like Mother Teresa said, no great things can be done, only small things with great love. And so coming out of the emotion of all of that stuff and feeling quite helpless, to put all that emotion into that role and to feel empowered by a character like Alice, and to see and realize, that this is who I feel represents my ancestors, because only the strong survived. To see that, to feel that, and to live my acting, performance in that, it gave me even more reason to choose to be happy today. To choose to be happy, to choose to have hope, to choose to have faith, just choose to believe that things will get better, and that this is just but a moment. And it made me feel more empowered to have that perspective with everything that has been going on.
There is a dedication that is included at the end of this film, and I would like to ask Krystin. I'd like to ask you to share what the film's dedication is, and to whom and why you included that.
It was to all of the people who came before us, to all the people presently, and to the future. But primarily it was Peter. It was a great idea of Peter's to dedicate it to the past, and it was only right to do so. And so it was a great idea on his part.
It was just acknowledging, what has, like Kristen said, what's happened before us, what is continuing to happen, and to, try and stop the kind of systemic issues that kind of continue, to go on in this community in the United States. And unless we do have, it doesn't have to be activism all the time. It can be, through the lens of something creative like a film like this, and doing it in a different way with, what Kristen's vision was, and someone like with Keke's performance who can also kind of reach a younger audience. This type of story, I think, was really interesting.
I think that's actually a really good segue into a question that we're actually taking from Twitter that we put to our own audience. This question comes from a Twitter poll from our LA Times Entertainment account. And the question that our readers wanted to know the most from you all is, what are the biggest takeaways that you hope audiences leave with? And I think a lot of the ground that we've covered already in this conversation probably leads into the answer to this question, but just to crystallize it, when people see this movie starting at Sundance and later this spring when it is released in March, what do you hope the takeaways are?
That I think for me, especially as it pertains, as a millennial, and yes, I think specifically as a Black American, but also as a young person, as somebody coming to understand the world, coming to understand how to activate themselves and really be a conscious part of how things get done. Everything ain't going to be perfect. There are always going to be setbacks. There's always going to be an uphill battle. You truly have to be the change that you want to see. You truly have to. And you can look on the past as a guarantee factor that things can get better. Not only that things can get better, but that that there's been worse. So, I think that for me is a really big thing, especially as it pertains to how we deal with the atrocities that are currently still happening, how we find faith, how we tap back into hope, how we sustain it, is that realize and accept that it's never going to be just, oh, boop. There's always going to be work to get done. And don't let that discourage you, but let that propel you forward,
I would say defining yourself a lot. Keke said it. She just said everything beautifully. But to pile on to that, I would also say defining yourself on your own terms and not letting anyone or anything define who you are as a person. Along with, it only takes one person to start a movement or to start a conversation. And that adds on to what Keke was saying.
And Peter, any additional closing thoughts?
I think it's, any time anyone's silent, there's no kind of progression or a chance to move forward. And I think her character, she had a voice in the early years of her life on the plantation, and she really finds it. And once she discovers what her true history and what, these lies have been told to her, and that transformation, I think is really important to kind of, look at and understand in a different way.
The only thing I would add to that is I think this movie imparts another important lesson, which is the power of learning one's own history, right? And also the power of Pam Grier, which,
okay,
thank you. It's like, so it's a very strong message. It's a very overdue message. I'm really glad that that's part of this film as well. And thank you all for joining us today to talk about Alice. It's been a really great conversation, and excited to have people out there finally see this film that you made.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.